even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
In court Tuesday in Buffalo, New York, a woman charged with mailing a deadly poison to the White House.
Pascal Ferrier faces federal charges of threatening the President of the United States. Investigators releasing the image of this Canadian woman. They say that she mailed in 6 ricin-filled letters last week. One of those letters was intended for the White House. Although it never reached the President, the affidavit says the Canadian woman called the President an ugly tyrant clown and writing, quote, "Give up and remove your application for this election. So I made a special gift for you and for you to make a decision. This gift is in this letter. If it doesn't work, I will find a better recipe for another poison, or I might use my gun."
Fox's Alex Hogan. The letters were intercepted at a federal mail processing center. He offered no last words prior to receiving a lethal injection. 50-year-old William Emmett LaCroix executed late Tuesday at a federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. He'd raped and killed a nurse in Georgia in 2001. City lawmakers in Seattle reaffirming their decision to reduce funding to the city's police department, overriding Mayor Jenny Durkin's veto of legislation to cut $4 million from the police budget and spend some of it on community programs. More teams clinching spots in Major League Baseball's postseason.
A walk-off in extras sends the Cleveland Indians to the playoffs.
Hit in the air, deep right center, angles back, he's out of room, it's out of here! The Indians walk off the White Sox!
Call courtesy of Fox Sports Ohio. Jose Ramirez helping his MVP case in the American League with a game-winning 3-run homer as the Indians defeat the Chicago White Sox 4-1 in 10 innings, clinching a playoff berth Tuesday night. It's the 4th time in 5 years that Cleveland will be playing October baseball. The Chicago Cubs also clinched a playoff spot on Tuesday thanks to some help from a few other clubs, while the Atlanta Braves clobbered the Miami Marlins 11-1 to earn their 3rd straight NL East title. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Have you responded to the 2020 Census of Guam? If not, time is running out. Call 645-2020 before September 30 to make sure you and your family are counted in the 2020 census. Our call center hours are Monday to Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Sunday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. We only get this chance every 10 years. Don't get left out of the count. Together, we can make a difference.
$5 foot long. Pile high with veggies. They're back. Any foot long is a $5 foot long when you buy one at regular price. At participating locations, Subway, eat fresh.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Here we go again, another day on Tall Tales, starting out the way I always start out, with a respectful reading of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. A good place to start any endeavor is the United States Constitution. And if you are a regular tailgater, you know that that's the way we start. It's the way I start every day. If you're not a regular tailgater, my condolences. It is a tip-off as to where the program goes and what the program is about. It's about the United States Constitution, individual freedom, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution of the United States, and all of the things that we enjoy, and what I consider to be the greatest country in the world. In fact, the greatest country the world has ever seen and probably will ever see. Just kind of let you know what you're in for. And if you aren't into those things, well, then you've come to the right place, because you probably need a little bit of education, which is abundant on Tall Tales. Correct, Jose?
Yes, sir. My cup runneth over.
All right. So I hold a title of being one of the more educated people here on the island. It's, kind of part of the pride that I have in my own modesty. And the reason that I consider myself in that category is that I've never missed an episode of Tall Tales.
Very good.
Yeah, a great way to be educated. I start out the program with with something called Zemi Ikotni. Which is my backwards bilingual play on words that means meet the press. Zemi Ikotni. Press the meet, we turn it around, translate it into English, meet the press, except this one is so much better than the one that Chuck Todd hosts on PMSNBC. Listen and you'll understand why. I take the editorial offerings of our two daily newspapers, go through them with a blue pencil, looking for errors in grammar, English usage, theory, what have you. Having done so, I assign the coveted blue star with the better of the two, which means for the last 3 months to the Guam Daily Post, because the Daily News apparently the editorial board is on strike because they don't write local editorials anymore. They run boilerplate from USA Today or Gannett News Service, which 97% of the time looks like it was the product of someone with a terminal case of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. Even in the face of poor performance or no performance by the Daily News, however, the Post doesn't get the blue star by default. The blue star is never awarded by default. If the Post editorial measures up to the high standards of Tall Tales, then the Post editorial will be awarded the blue star. And ordinarily, that's what I've come to expect from the Post. So today, the Daily News has run something by a guy named Glenn Harland Reynolds, who is a University of Tennessee law professor and is a member of the USA Today Board of Contributors. They apparently haven't been paying much attention to what he writes, because he writes some pretty good stuff. He is atypical of what USA Today usually presents. But because Glenn makes some really good points about the demise of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, may she rest in peace, I'm going to spend a little time with this editorial and some related materials before I get to the card. But because it's going to take a little while, let me just tell you what's on the card when I get to it. It starts out with Tello versus learned helplessness. And if you were fortunate enough to listen to the Ray Gibson show this morning, you'll have some idea of what it was that I was talking about. I rode the Ferris wheel twice on Ray's show this morning. If you are a regular listener to Ray's show, and really, if I've said this once, I say it 2 or 3 times every day and you hear it. Ray says, set your dial to 93.3. You needn't touch it again. So you should have it set to 93.3, 6 a.m., tune into Ray. Pretty good stuff. And in addition to Ray's usual banter, the chirping of Montesilva and the additions of the laughter of the real Joe Cruz.
That's not a laugh track.
Yeah.
That's the real Joe Cruz.
The real Joe Cruz. I occasionally make a cameo appearance on Ray's show. So this morning I made a cameo appearance on Ray's show talking about the lawsuit that Thomas Peinhoff has filed. But then later on, I think about 9:40 or so, I had an attack of Tim Rohr's syndrome. I had kind of finished up what I was doing at home, and I was out walking, listening to the Ray Gibson show, of course. And I heard Tello come on and say, well, with this I'm paraphrasing here, with this pandemic, there's nothing we can do because the Organic Act gives her all that power. And I had a case of Tim Rohr syndrome. He's explained twice that he tunes into the show and he hears something and he cannot resist the compulsion to call the show and set the record straight. Well, I had that attack this morning. So I called the show and pointed out some rather, to me, obvious things about the governor's magic powers concerning the Wuhan virus emergency. That was my second ride on the Ferris wheel. So I'm going to go back and do a reprise on the things that I talked about as far as the governor's magic powers. And that's on the card as Tello versus learned helplessness, with an added benefit of an exploration of the works of a doubting Thomas. Thomas Peinhoff. Yeah.
Thomas Peinhoff.
And then I've got a holdover from yesterday's calendar, Rory versus we're all in this together. And then I've got more of the daily of the PDN versus the news. I've got Tall Tales versus Scottis, Crozier versus Mertz, Democrats versus Chamorro Self-Determination, etc. And let's see. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you about this. I've got the 35th Guam legislature versus Lulian Guerrero, Neil Warr, and Ray Topaznia. I've got Dave Lotz versus Maria Hernandez. Maria Hernandez is the separatist who had did some flaming about the action pack. Well, Dave Lotz came out with his own screed in today's Post, which I think really strengthens my position and weakens Maria Hernandez. I've also got Neil Weir versus the Dragon Windmill. You regular tall tail, your tailgaters know that the sound is the sound for a parenthesis. So when I say windmill, when I say dragon windmill, you know that the word windmill is in parenthesis. So I'll come back to these things after I finish with...
Sounds like a Don Quixote.
There you go. Yes, sir. Don Quixote tilting at windmills because he thinks they're dragons. Yeah, well, Neil Weir.
Nice.
Yeah, okay. So here we go with the Daily News editorial. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died, and the country, or at least its political class, is descending into what will no doubt be a multi-week screaming fit. In fact, the screaming has already begun. But that fact tells us something about the state of our nation, and it's not anything good. When your political system can be thrown into hysteria by something as predictable as the death of an octogenarian with advanced cancer, there's something wrong with your political system. And when your judicial system can be redirected by such an event, there's something wrong with your judicial system too. Our political system is a mess in general, partly because of the influence of social media, and partly because America has arguably the worst political class in its history. Pretty much everything seems descended into screeching hysteria. I'm old enough to remember when activists threatened FCC Chair Ajit Pai and his family over network neutrality, something that was a source of screeching hysteria a few years ago, but that now hardly anyone even remembers. I have some ideas on how to fix that, but those will have to wait for another column. Suffice it to say that if what we're looking for is a long time horizon, self-discipline, and willingness to forego immediate advantages for long-term good of the nation, we've got the wrong political class. So let's look at the Supreme Court. Why does Justice Ginsburg's replacement matter so much that even respectable media figures are calling for violence in the streets? If President Trump tries to replace her, because the Supreme Court has been narrowly balanced for a while with first Justice Anthony Kennedy and later Justice John Roberts as the swing vote, Ginsburg's replacement by a conservative will finally produce a long-heralded shift of the Supreme Court to a genuine conservative majority. That shift matters because for more than I have been alive, all sorts of very important societal issues, from desegregation to abortion to presidential elections and legislative districting, have gone to the Supreme Court for decision. Supreme Court nominations and confirmations didn't used to mean much in my lifetime. It was kind of a ho-hum type of deal. Louis Brandeis was the first nominee to appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee. That was in the 20s. Because of the court, while important, wasn't the be-all and end-all of so many deeply felt and highly divisive issues. Now it very much is. And you've heard me go off on this rant more than once. So Glenn Harlan Reynolds is obviously a very intelligent guy, because what he's saying here pretty much agrees with the things I've said. That's the litmus test, in case you didn't know. The point isn't whether the court got the questions right. The point is that it decided these important issues, and having done so, took them off the table for democratic politics. When Congress decides an issue by passing a law, democratic politics can change that decision by electing a new Congress. When the court decides an issue by making a constitutional ruling, there's no real democratic remedy. And people don't stop to think about it, but the Supreme Court is completely undemocratic, anti-democratic. The closest that it comes to the will of the people is the confirmation of the justices for lifetime terms by members of the Senate. And that's not very close. That makes the Supreme Court a source of final and largely irrevocable authority that is immune to the ordinary winds of democratic change, an extremely important prize. And when extremely important prizes are at stake, people fight and get hysterical. Almost as bad, the court is unrepresentative. That doesn't matter when it's deciding technical legal issues, but once it starts ruling on social issues of sweeping importance to all sorts of Americans, its lack of diversity becomes a problem. Yeah, and exactly. And nowadays, the word diversity is a magic word, right? I want to do this over here. Yeah, well, why do you want to do that, Bob? For diversity reasons. Oh, okay, yeah. Diversity Diversity is such a wonderful thing. It's like, it's like Finn and Denny. I don't care what you put it on. It makes it better. That doesn't, as you were picking back up with the article here, and not just the usual racial and gender diversity, every current member of the court is a graduate of Harvard or Yale. Ginsburg offered a bit of diversity there, having spent her third year from Ivy League upstart Columbia University. But she spent her first 2 years at Harvard. All of them were elite lawyers, academics, or appellate judges before arriving on the court. They are all card-carrying, credentialed members of America's elite political class, which, as I mentioned earlier, is in general pretty terrible. And I've made this point before. The Supreme Court now is a court of judges. We don't put people on the court who haven't been judges on circuit courts of appeal, which is a horrible mistake, because it does mean we have created this elite body of 9 people that has almost nothing in common with your average American Joe Sixpack. Justices used to come from much more diverse backgrounds. Until well into the 20th century, many justices, Justice Robert Jackson was the last, didn't have law degrees. Robert Jackson was appointed by FDR, but he's one of my favorite justices. Robert Jackson presided at the war crimes trial in Nuremberg after World War II. He's a very important figure in American law. Didn't have a law degree. He's the one who came up with a very appropriate quote concerning the Supreme Court and infallibility. Justice Robert Jackson said, "We are not final because we are infallible. We are infallible because we're final." But anyhow, smart guy, really good justice, never even went to law school. Having, quote, read law after the fashion of Abraham Lincoln, and for that matter, pretty much every lawyer and judge until the 20th century. There was a time when you could be admitted to the bar on Guam by, quote, reading law. The fancy term for it is a preceptorship. And there's some papers that you had to fill out, and you had to work under the supervision of a lawyer for a particular period of time. And then you could take the bar exam, and if you passed, you could become a lawyer, never having even seen a law school. That was then, this is now. Many justices had been farmers, military officers, small and large businessmen, even in one case an actuary. But now they are all, in Dahlia Lithwick's words, judicial thoroughbreds, with very similar backgrounds that make them very different from most Americans or even from most lawyers. I let it be known through channels that when the next vacancy came up, this one, much as I love being the host of Tall Tales, I would make a sacrifice for the good of the country just to add some diversity. But anyhow, that's another story. We'll pull that one off until some other day.
Have a cervix.
Yeah. So that's the problem here, and I have blamed these hotly contested confirmation hearings. The first one began when a nominee was borked. The word bork is now in the dictionary. It's a verb. When Robert Bork, perhaps probably the most qualified person to be appointed to the Supreme Court in the last at least 50 years, couldn't pass muster with the Senate because they didn't like him. So they borked him.
Ouch.
Yeah. And then, of course, with Clarence Thomas, Clarence Thomas characterized the process that he was put through as a high-tech lynching, which was unfortunate because Clarence Thomas, and here's a mark of excellence, is my favorite justice. He is someone who understands what the Supreme Court shouldn't do. So, Sherlock Holmes, if Sherlock Holmes were advising the Supreme Court, he'd say, guys and gals, people with and without cervixes, it's not what you do, it's what you don't do that's important. I've got another piece here from the National Review, and it's titled, Ruth Bader Ginsburg Didn't Understand Her Job. If RBG wanted to be a lawmaker, she should have run for Congress. And here's the column. Ruth Bader, Justice in Drag. Ruth Bader Ginsburg did a great many interesting and impressive things in her life, but she never did the one thing she probably really should have done, run for office. Ruth Bader Ginsburg wasn't an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Not really. She was a legislator in judicial drag. You need not take my word for this. Ask her admirers. Quote, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a vision for America, Linda Hirschman argues in the Washington Post. What was her vision? Quote, to make America fairer, to make justice bigger. That's not the job for a judge. That's the job for a legislator. The job of making law properly belongs to people. Some find this part hard to handle. Lawmakers. Making law is not the job of a judge. The job of a judge is to see that the law is followed and applied in a given case. It doesn't matter if the law is unfair, if the law is unjust. That is not the judge's concern. If you have a vision for America and a desire to make the law more fair or more just, then there's a place for you in Congress. That's where the laws are made. The distinction is an important one. As you may have noticed over the course of summer, Americans do not agree on everything. Some of us have ideas about what's good, decent, fair, just, wise, intelligent, prudent, and necessary that are radically different from the ideas of other Americans have about what's good, decent, etc. Democracy is not good for very much, but democratic institutions are how we settle those disagreements. Even the anti-democratic elements of U.S. government, such as the Bill of Rights, which put certain questions beyond the reach of mere temporary majorities, came out of democratic institutions and were implemented through a democratic process. It's from that they derive their legitimacy. Democracy has its shortcomings, mostly rooted in the fact that human beings are universally fallen and the majority savage. But the alternative is bonking each other over the head over every disagreement. Put another way, the alternative is might makes right, which is exactly the kind of jurisprudence Justice Ginsburg and others of her kind have long practiced. There isn't a gall darn word about abortion or gay rights in the Constitution, and it's absurd to think that such rights had been hiding there, lurking in the penumbras since the 18th century, waiting to be discovered by a committee of progressive lawyers who somehow see the real Constitution that went completely undetected by the men who wrote and ratified the document we actually have. And a really good example is what I refer to as Herman, quote, marrying Henry. Herman cannot marry Henry. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's a legal fiction. A marriage is something that is entered into between a man and a woman, which the state puts its imprimatur on if certain formalities are complied with. Herman marrying Henry is is just a certain kind of roommates. And when you come down to it, when the law was changed so that Herman could go through that ceremonial marriage, sue cake makers, and create all kinds of trouble, not anyone, the only state that had actually went that direction was Massachusetts. The entire change in our whole social fabric was imposed upon us by the judiciary, by the Supreme Court. And that's exactly the point that this guy's making. Well, let's take a short break, and then I'm going to come back to the card.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Okay, Google. Hi, Bixby.
Open the Point app.
Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations. Check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on Google Play or go to thepoint.gu.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, taking a peek at the Post editorial, past slaps on the wrist will not deter drug smuggling into the island's prison. I guess this editorial is written for the benefit of judges. If it reference what I just finished up doing, judges are not susceptible to the popular will. So you can write editorials all day long about the weak sentencing procedures that the court uses, Guam Daily Post. It's not going to make any difference. The pressure point here is, guess where? The legislature. The legislature can change the rules as to pretrial release, sentencing, and a lot of other things dealing with the criminal law. But to rant and rave at judges for not being tough enough, not going to make much difference. And it's not going to get you the blue star today, Guam Daily Post. Okay, next on the agenda is Tello versus learned helplessness. And I'm going to start out, I suppose, by defining terms as to what learned helplessness means. I have a definition here that I picked up from a place called Do We Have the Power to Overcome Learned Helplessness from an Australian magazine. And here's a quick and dirty definition. Learned helplessness is a term that originates in animal biology. And I suspect that we have someone out there, a tailgater, who is very familiar with animal biology. I don't want to mention Tom Poole's name, but anyhow. But this is not about animals, so that's where the experiments began. Learned helplessness refers to eventual loss of mental capability to respond to some discomforting stimulus when the physical ability to respond is removed through repeated cycles of restraint. In human psychology, it describes the loss of an individual's ability to respond to any situation, with eventual result that people give up without even trying. So learned helplessness is sort of like acquired apathy. And I'm going to give you a not so apt analogy, an autobiographical not so apt analogy, dealing with a nephew. I guess it must have been 40 years ago. A young nephew who had never spent a night away from home. And one night when we were visiting with his parents, he was a real Uncle Bob fan. In fact, when I'd ask him, boy, what do you want to be when you grow up? His answer was, I want to be just like you, Uncle Bob. Smart boy, right? So, Uncle Bob, I want to go home and spend the night with you and Auntie Lou. Is that okay? Is that okay? So we cleared it with his mom and dad. He said, yeah, okay, we can do that. So we went home, and everything was fine until about 8:30, until I said, okay, boy, time to go to bed. No, Uncle Bob, I think I better go home. No, remember, you're going to spend the night here. Remember, that's what you wanted to do, and that's what we talked about with your mom and dad. Uncle Bob, I can't spend the night here because I don't have my toothbrush. Well, your mom gave us your toothbrush before we left, so come on now, it's time to go to bed. Uncle Bob, I can't sleep here. I don't have my pajamas. Well, we brought your pajamas along, so here are your pajamas. Come on now, it's time to go to bed. Uncle Bob, I can't sleep here because I got to go home and feed my doggy. Don't worry, your mom's going to take care of feeding the dog. Now, come on, boy. Be a big boy. You're a big boy. Let's go to bed. And he said, Uncle Bob, I'm not a big boy. I'm just a little boy, and I miss my mommy.
Oh, man.
So when I rode the Ferris wheel the second time, it's because I heard Tello say, oh, there's nothing we can, again, paraphrasing and simplifying, there's nothing we can do with the governor and the way she's exercising her powers because of the Organic Act. So I called in.
It is what it is.
Yeah, so I called in, and, it was the Organic Act, and then, well, yeah, but, I'd have to get 7 other members, and, we'd have to override the veto, and it's really, really hard. It's kind of like my nephew, pretext after pretext as to what could be done. And the answer as to what could be done with respect to, I'm going to refer to the governor and the draconian measures that she has in an arbitrary and capricious fashion put in place. What can be done is right in the statute. It's in black and white. Her magic powers don't come from the Organic Act. The Organic Act doesn't give her any powers to deal with an endemic. She has special powers concerning rebellion or invasion, but not the Wuhan virus. Her powers all came from the legislature. After 9/11, a group of intellectuals got together and put together a model act as to how to deal with emergencies. And a lot of jurisdictions adopted that model act, and we did too. That's where our whole scheme came from. And that's where the governor's magic powers came from. So the legislature gave it to the governor. The legislature can take it away. The case law is quite clear that the federal government doesn't have, quote, police powers, the ability to deal with contagion, disease, quarantine, etc. State and local governments do, but only if they are creatures of statute. The governor can't do these things by executive order. There has to be statutory authority. So Title 10 of the Guam Code Annotated, Chapter 19, has a section that gives the governor her magic powers. And she is able to exercise those magic powers by executing an executive order saying, I'm declaring this territorial emergency, etc., laying out a few things, and it lasts for 30 days. And when she gets to the end of 30 days, she can renew it, and she can keep renewing it. And it's pursuant to these executive orders that she comes up with her quarantine rules and her everybody has to stay home rule and her checkpoints and all the rest of the stuff. So her power is a function of these executive orders that she enacts and continues to enact. And these things are found at 10 GCA Article 4, which begins at Section 19401. And it says a state of public emergency may be declared by the governor upon occurrence of a public health emergency as defined in blah, blah, blah. And 19402 tells you what the declaration must contain. 19403, the effect of the declaration. And subsection A is emergency powers. So that's where the emergency powers come from. And 19405, termination of declaration. 19405A. The governor shall terminate the declaration of a state of public health emergency by executive order upon finding that the occurrence of an illness or health condition that caused the emergency no longer poses a high probability of a large number of deaths, etc. Well, she's not going to do that. We know that. And then subsection B, automatic termination. Notwithstanding any other provision of this chapter, the declaration of a state of public health emergency shall be terminated automatically after 30 days unless renewed by the governor, under the same standards and procedures as set forth in this article. Any such renewal shall also be terminated automatically after 30 days unless renewed by the governor, etc. So she does it, she can do it in 30-day chunks. And I think we're probably on the fourth chunk by now. She's kicked out so many executive orders that you almost need a battery of Philadelphia lawyers to keep track of them all. Okay, and then here's the kicker. So she can terminate the executive order that gives her magical power. It will expire by operation of law at the end of 30 days if she doesn't renew it. And then subsection C. By a majority vote, the legislature may terminate the declaration of a state of public health emergency at any time from the date of original declaration upon a finding that the occurrence of an illness or health condition that caused the emergency no longer poses a high probability, etc., etc. Such termination by the legislature shall override any renewal by the governor. So 8 senators, Tello and 7 more, or fewer than that if some of them don't show up, could terminate the governor's emergency powers now. And if they were so inclined, they could go to the drawing board and come up with something that doesn't give the governor carte blanche to do whatever she wants to in an arbitrary and capricious fashion. So when we were having the chat this morning on ratio, I said, after we went through that, the fact that she didn't have a toothbrush and that she had to feed her, all the rest of the pretexts for not taking action, I pointed out to her, tell her, all you got to do is introduce a resolution, and cite to this section of the law and call for an end to the powers. And if you don't do anything more than that, you will at least get the governor's attention. And I didn't use this term, but if she did that, she'd box in the other members of the legislature. I pointed out that the way government works is that, in fact, the way human nature works is that when there's power available, it's human nature for each of us to gather as much power to himself as is available. That's just going to be the way things are. And that's why the Constitution is such a marvelous piece of work, because it takes that into consideration and it stacks interest against interest. It's not that, we're all so righteous that we don't have to do that. So the legislature has its bag, the executive has its bag, and the judiciary wants to take all the rest of the bags. So the governor has these magic powers pursuant to Chapter 19, and being after what is it? We're all
in this together.
No, the excuse.
Oh,
we're all trying. What is it? None of us is perfect.
None of us are perfect.
None of us is perfect. Yeah, none of us is perfect. So the governor being imperfect has gathered as much of this authority to herself as she could. Not a surprise. That's what people do. And what has the legislature done in order to curb that power? Where is Sherlock Holmes now that we need him? It's not what the legislature did. It's what the legislature didn't do. The legislature has been in a Rip Van Winkle posture since the beginning of this emergency. So, Ron, I got to take a short break here, and then I'm going to come back and pick up a few words of wisdom from you.
Day, this is Carl from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future. Whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community, our dedicated team in Guam and on the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and Mezcla Dos are open for takeout and delivery services. More details, call the Hagåtña location at 479-2652 or Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon at 646-6295. Get your Mezcla fix at the comfort of your home.
Okay, so here we are back on the beam, back on the show. We got about 10 more minutes till that big halftime show that Ron and everybody, all of the other tailgaters out there have been looking forward to so avidly. Correct, Ron?
Happy Senator. Happy Guam. Yeah, absolutely. I always enjoy your show in the afternoon, Senator. You know, Jordan Peterson, he's one of my favorite. I watch him on YouTube a lot. He's a psychologist who really talks about the role of responsibility and how men should take responsibility for their lives, particularly men. But he talks about lobsters and lobsters fighting. And what they found out is if lobsters don't let the others lose sometimes, or if they don't let them win sometimes, they'll stop fighting at all. And so the whole point that you were mentioning earlier about, you know, becoming hopeless and stopping the fight and things like that is very true, particularly when people feel that they're not winning at all. And it's a interesting phenomenon. And I think there's a classic example about training elephants that when they're babies, they tie them up to a steel stake with a heavy chain. And so then when they're adults, it just takes like a minor piece of rope and it will keep an elephant at bay because it thinks that it cannot move anywhere anymore. And I don't know, it's action paralysis has always baffled me. And particularly, I've thought a lot about it here. And part of it is either people don't want to insult each other by acting against them, or they don't want to offend anyone in an extended network. I'm not sure what the real cause of much of the action paralysis is, but it seems to be connected in some way to these extended networks people are a part of.
Well, I remember one time there was a kerfuffle over whether or not the Civil Service Commission should reach its decision in an open session. I don't know if you remember that, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
And And Tony Lamarena, who was the executive director of the Civil Service Commission at that time, came on, I don't remember if it was Ray or John Anderson, came on a talk show and said, well, it's really important that they reach their decisions in an executive session and come out and announce what the decision is. He said, because, nobody wants to be, nobody wants to go going around and having everybody give them an Atan Baba. So the Atan Baba avoidance theory of decision making is alive and well. But if you're going to be a senator, anyone who wants to run for senator ought to get his neighbor to come over and pose in front of a camera and have his neighbor give him the worst possible Atan Baba that he can, and blow that up to about an 8x10 and hang it on the wall and look at it every day. Because if you're going to be a senator, if you're going to be effective at all, you're going to get Atan Babas. And if you don't, it means you probably aren't doing much.
Other than trying to make everyone happy all the time. And that's the downside of not doing anything, is that it's hard to please everyone all the time. And for some reason, I think that people do want to please everyone, which is unfortunate. You mentioned also the Organic Act and a number of other things. There's a lot of things our government can do to make a lot of areas of government better, but we probably haven't for various reasons. We don't, for example, optimize a number of things we could fix, and we could have fixed them long ago if we'd simply decided to do so or made a mandate to do so. But we simply have not chosen to do so.
Yeah, well, when it comes time, the Organic Act creates a structure of government, and it has a Bill of Rights in it, and it is not crammed full of restrictions on what the government can do. It's got a Bill of Rights. But I think a lot of times when senators are challenged to take a particular action, it's like my nephew. Well, I can't because I don't have my toothbrush. In other words, it is more comfortable to do nothing and suffer consequences, down the road than to take action now and run the risk of having someone criticize you.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting real question. Now, you had a great idea a few years ago, and you called it a name. I can't remember what you named it. It was basically being able to amend the Organic Act. You had a particular name you attributed to. I can't remember it.
Patriation.
Yeah, patriation of the Organic Act, which I think would just be an example of taking a step forward to assert more of our autonomy at the local level. And but for some reason, we don't really want to take those steps. And it's very, very odd that we don't take those steps, because they're baby steps toward, walking, so to speak, politically. Yeah.
Well, the separatists don't favor that approach. So if anyone moves forward towards patriating the Organic Act, he could look forward to a public hearing room full of people banging the floor with their Zoris because they don't like it.
And it's interesting how often such a small group can load way over senators in a way, especially when they have very, very small numbers. When we poll them, they're very, very small. But it's sometimes the loudness will try to make up for the low numbers in size.
Yeah, I think we see that with the separatists. I don't think that there are that many of them, but they're very, very vociferous and ubiquitous.
Yeah, I think also the other thing is there's a large majority of people who are very contrary to many of their views. And in fact, I've talked to many. We've done lots of research on them. Some people who are, it's interesting, when you talk to only Chamorro people, a number are just embarrassed by their behavior. And then they're not, in line with many of their views. And also our community is very diverse in terms of, who marries who. So we have a lot of different people marrying, and we have all kinds of aunts and uncles and cousins here that are of all races. And sometimes these really vocal views that are very negative can turn people off very quickly.
Yeah, well, and you've probably heard me expound on this before. This whole Chamorro self-determination thing is a ruse because there's only one real choice, and that's independence. So let's say that we had the so-called plebiscite limited only to Chamorros, and the Chamorros decided that they wanted to have independence. What happens next?
Right. Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I don't necessarily agree that there's only one choice. I do think that they've misstated the three options. They say it's independence, free association, or statehood, but really that's not what the three options are. The third option is integration.
Yeah.
And I think that Guam could integrate more, and there are ways for us to integrate more politically, and there are certainly steps. Many years ago, in the 1960s, American Samoa sought to integrate with Hawaii under a form of free association, and they were flatly rejected by Hawaii. Hawaii was a fairly new state at that time, and they wanted to have nothing to do with cooperating internationally, which is very unfortunate, because actually that would have been an interesting model to look at. That is a U.S. territory associating with an existing state for advantageous reasons. So if we associated with a place like Alaska, and I'm not saying Hawaii because Hawaii's already rejected the idea many years ago, we could mutually benefit in terms of education or in terms of cooperation in the U.S. Senate, because we have no Senate representation. And that's, to me, is our biggest problem that we have is representation in the U.S. Senate. We have no voice in the Senate. And I wish our delegates...
Ron, excuse me, it's very interesting, but I hear the band starting to march on the field for the big halftime show. So,
very nice to talk to you, sir, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The Keystone State could be the election key. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Trump back in Pennsylvania last night telling a rally outside Pittsburgh.
This is the most important election in the history of our country. I believe that. And this election is a matter of economic survival for Pennsylvania. You had the greatest year you've ever had last year, and you're really on your way. We were very, very sadly disturbed by what happened with China. They let the plague out.
The president narrowly defeated Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania 4 years ago, but Joe Biden is a native of Scranton, PA. Biden stayed home in Delaware Tuesday. His running mate Kamala Harris telling a roundtable meeting in Detroit foreign interference benefited the president last time.
Russia interfered in the election of the president of the United States in 2016, and they will do it again. In 2016, they targeted black voters. It's part of the report. And you know why? Because they knew that they could try and tap into a righteous distrust of the system.
Harris again critical of the administration's response to the coronavirus outbreak. No talks and no progress toward another coronavirus economic relief package.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell warned lawmakers that the Fed's exhausted its tools, slashing interest rates and boosting access to credit. And that's why Congress needs to intervene legislatively. But Congress is stymied by disputes over jobless aid and assistance to state and local governments. There's a divide of $1 trillion between what House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wants and what the Trump administration can support.
Fox's Chad Pergram. There is an agreement on a stopgap spending bill, however, that will extend the government's spending authority, which would have run out at the end of this month. The new deadline, more than a month beyond the November election. America is listening to Fox News.
The last day to respond to the 2020 Census of Guam is fast approaching. Respond by September 30, 2020 to help our island receive the federal funding it needs for essential services. We only receive this chance every 10 years. Don't get left out of the count. Contact the call center at 645-2020 to complete your interview today. Together, we can make a difference.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumon or call 646-1463.
President Trump says he will announce his choice to fill the Supreme Court vacancy on Saturday. Utah Senator Mitt Romney saying he supports moving forward, apparently assuring the GOP has the votes to confirm just weeks before the High Court's new term is scheduled to begin.
With their courtroom draped in black in remembrance of Justice Ginsburg, the remaining 8 justices return for the start of the fall term on October 5th to a court in limbo and an election with a potential pitfall over ballots just weeks away.
Every vote counts!
Just 2 decades ago, in the year 2000, a full court of 9 justices had to rule on Bush v. Gore, as an anxious nation waited to know who would be president. If a similar situation happened this year, and the president's nominee is not yet on the bench, major constitutional and political upheaval may lie ahead for a nation already gripped by a pandemic.
Fox's David Spunt, the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg will lie in repose at the Supreme Court starting Wednesday. Thousands expected to pay their respects. The White House says Air Force Two struck a bird on takeoff from New Hampshire Tuesday, causing the pilot to return to the airport. The White House says the plane was never in any danger, but Vice President Pence rode back to D.C. on a Secret Service cargo plane. A warning Tuesday had an extradition hearing for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange.
A psychiatrist telling a court in London it's highly likely Julian Assange will attempt suicide if he's extradited to the U.S. to face spying charges. Neuropsychiatry professor Michael Koppelman was appearing as a witness for Assange as he challenges an American extradition request. The professor saying Assange has a family history of depression and suicide and has been experiencing hallucinations in prison. The hearing continues. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Time is running out. The last day to respond to the 2020 Census of Guam is fast approaching. Call 645-2020 to respond before September 30. Our call center hours are Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Sunday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. This is your chance to influence the decisions made for the next 10 years. Don't get left out of the count. Together, we can make a difference.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So there we are, another big halftime show here on Tall Tales. A great show if there ever were one. We do it every day at 1700. Hope you can join us tomorrow. When I left off before the big halftime show, I was chatting with Ron McNinch about what I consider to be the ruse of the so-called Chamorro self-determination. It's called the Decolonization Commission, but it's really the Chamorro Independence Commission. And they have deluded people into thinking that there are three possible political statuses for the island. And they say the three are statehood, free association, and independence. And Ron points out that if you were to go by United Nations documents, it shouldn't be statehood, it should be incorporation. And I agree, but that's not the law that we're dealing with here on Guam, which is very nicely constructed to deflect attention from what's really going on. What we have here is a separatist movement, a small but vocal group who think that Guam should be independent from the United States, an independent sovereign country without being part of the United States. And that is actually the only one of the three that they advance that is possible. I've gone into so many times as to why statehood isn't going to happen when we only have 160,000 people. Free association is a legal impossibility because in order for the United States to associate with another entity, that entity would have to be sovereign, would have to be independent. So there we are, independence. So that leaves only separation, independence, etc. So by going through this charade of saying, well, what we're really after is righting this historical wrong, Chamorros should be able to choose, etc. What we have is a scheme that allows independentistas to broadcast their propaganda during the time that they're on the government payroll and kind of legitimatize the whole thing. Tactically, it's perhaps a more sound approach for them to wrap this in identity politics. This is really all about Chamorros, grievance politics, historical wrongs, etc. We're just trying to right a historical wrong, when really the object is an independent Guam separate from the United States. And the last time Ron and I talked, I gave the hypothetical example concerning integration. What would happen if we had a plebiscite and we only allowed Chamorros to vote in a plebiscite, and 100% of the people who voted, 100% minus, Michael Bavacqua and Maria Hernandez and a few people of that ilk, say 99% of the people say, we want to maintain our position with the United States. We want to continue to be part of the American empire. Would that be self-determination? They'd say, no, because that would just be more colonization. So we couldn't do that. Even if it's exactly what the people want, it wouldn't be self-determination. So this whole Chamorro self-determination, and then the same question that I posed to Ron, let's say that we were able to convince the Congress that the Chamorro people favor independence. What happens then? Is Congress going to cut Guam loose to say that American sovereignty ends at noon on the 4th of July? You're on your own, kids? What's going to happen? And, of course, the separatists don't want to talk about that, although I'm sure they have their own plans as to how to proceed. What they want to sell is identity politics and grievance politics. Anyhow, enough of that. I promised when I mentioned the card that Tello versus learned helplessness also would get into the Doubting Thomas. And the Doubting Thomas is a gentleman named Thomas Pinehopf, who operates the Live House Inc. And Shady Lady Bar and Tavern. And with his lawyers, Fisher and Azuzu. Now, there's a nice combination. Fisher and Azuzu, right?
I see a theme song coming.
Well, if Tom is a Fisher, Pescadotne, he should change they should call the firm Pescadot Zanazuzu, right? Then you'd have the coconut crab and the fisherman all in one swell food.
Will represent you land and sea.
Exactly, yeah. So they represent Thomas Pinehopf, who is attempting to establish file a class action based on 48 United States Code, Section 1983. It's your classic civil rights lawsuit. And he is complaining that, what's new, that the governor has acted in an arbitrary and capricious fashion in the way she's handled this pandemic, closing businesses down willy-nilly. It's an interesting suit. There was nothing in the news to say that Pescadot and Azuzu are going for a TRO and an injunction, because if they don't, the lawsuit will perhaps continue on until the governor, for one reason or another, no longer exercising her magic powers. The case in Pennsylvania was filed in May, and it was just decided last week. So lawsuits, as a general rule, don't move very quickly. You got a TRO and a preliminary injunction, that can move right along. So I read through the complaint, and I don't see that I'm not a betting person, but if I were, I would not give you short odds on the chances of success of that lawsuit. I wish them the best. I hope it works out for them. But I'm taking a wait and see attitude. And then I'm going to step back and once again look at it from a policy standpoint after finishing that long rant about the Supreme Court and the political class, et cetera, and coming back to a theme that I repeat from time to time here on Tall Tales, and that is that decisions or resolution of conflicts reached through a legislative means are almost always superior to conflicts resolved through judicial action. And it goes back to the thinking in the materials that I read on the Supreme Court. And that's this: the courts are anti-democratic. The court is the elitist branch of our government. It has less connection with the people than any other part of our government. The legislature is the popular branch of the government. And the idea in a democratic society with a properly structured democracy is that through democratic means, resolutions will be reached on most controversies that not everyone will be happy with, but as a general principle, everyone can live with. And if Pescadot and Azuzu are successful, it won't have the same impact as it would if the legislature got off, ended the Rip Van Winkle syndrome that it seems to be trapped in and did its job. For instance, using its powers in Title 9, in Chapter 19, it would be a far superior approach to the one that we have right now. The legislature should never put itself in a position when it's at the mercy of the governor. And that's where it is right now until 8 people come forward and modify that power or take it away from the governor. The legislature and all the people, including Thomas Pinehopf, are at the mercy of the governor. And when people are in that situation, they do what Thomas Pinehopf did. They fight back. They hire lawyers. They go to court. They sue. I'm going to introduce another vocabulary word, one that I've used before, Krytarchy, 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 government by judges, Krytarchy. And anyone who is a student of government should see Krytarchy as not even the last resort. It's not a good way to run a government. Witness our Supreme Court and the mess that our Supreme Court has gotten our country in by acting as the lawmaking body, as the governing body, instead of the adjudicating body. So I wish Doubting Thomas all of the success. I hope he has a good resolution to his lawsuit, but the better result here would be for the governor to understand that when you have these magic powers that you can use in a draconian fashion, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. The governor needs to exercise some restraint in this whole matter. I just was reminded here, chapter 19, what do you think the genesis of chapter 19 was, Jose? Where do you think it came from?
Like the original, where it was.
Yeah.
I would just think.
Get ready.
The Constitution?
Nope. The 19th floor.
Oh, man.
Uh-huh.
I think they want to throw it from the 19th
The
floor.
19th floor. We thought we knew what was going on the 19th floor, but actually they had this little factory up there making magic powers for the governor, kind of like the witch's brew in The Wizard of Oz, was all up there on the 19th floor. All right, so much for Thomas Pinehopf and Tello versus Learned Helplessness. I go next to Dave Lotz versus Maria Hernandez. And you'll recall yesterday, Maria Hernandez actually wasn't on the card in propria persona, right? There was an item on the card that I described as by proxy versus action pack. And you tailgaters know that the sound is the vocal rendering of parentheses. So when I make that sound, I was actually referring to Senator Kelly Marsh Titano. So Kelly Marsh Titano wrote a letter to the editor called Guam Action Pack Pushes Candidates Bad for Guam. So Maria Hernandez is on the payroll over at Kelly Marsh Titano, and she was the apparent proxy for the senator in this letter to the editor. And without going into it, she was very critical of the action pack because, for instance, I'll just take a couple of excerpts out of this. She said, it's a shame to see Guam Action Pack interfere in our political affairs. Interfere in our political affairs.
Are they Russian?
Well, who is our?
Who is our?
Yeah. Who is our political affairs when they have not once advocated for indigenous rights? So I suppose the implication there is that if you're not indigenous, then you're interfering. It's a shame to see Guam Action Pack interfere in our political affairs when they have not once advocated for indigenous rights, the very cornerstone of our community values and the basis of our Enefresi. So, you know, these pronouns they get trickier and trickier, aren't they? Our doesn't mean you and me. No, it means indigenous. I have a confession here, Jose, about this word indigenous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still stuck in the National Geographic mode of indigenous people.
Which is?
Well, I remember as a youngster, you know, you could find in National Geographics in the school library, et cetera, and there'd be articles about the discovery of this tribe in some jungle in Southeast Asia that didn't know, had no idea what the world was about beyond the boundaries of their own villages, you know, natives, so to speak. And the thinking was, well, these people have had no connection with civilization whatsoever. They're indigenous. And, you know, there was always this kind of thought process that they would be at such a disadvantage in dealing with people from, quote, civilization, which is a dirty word nowadays. You know, I'll get punished for using that word. So we have to be careful not to take advantage of their naivete and their lack of sophistication. That was kind of the whole thing about, you know, that's kind of where I learned about what indigenous meant and what indigenous people were, et cetera. I don't know how well that works here on Guam, not as a matter of politics, but as a matter of the historical record. Guam was the first place colonized by first island in the whole Pacific Ocean colonized by Westerners. Maria Hernandez. That's a really good indigenous name, right?
Which place?
Yeah, Maria Hernandez. So, but anyhow, I don't want to make an issue out of that. However people feel about where they are, what their position is in the world, it's a matter of individual choice. But I get a kick out of what she says here when she says, it's a shame to see Guam Action Pac interfere in our political affairs when they have not once advocated for indigenous rights, the very cornerstone of our community values and the basis of Enefresi. Kind of, is that racist?
Maybe this was meant for a future.
Wow.
It's yet to be written. Because I don't understand why people from this action pack, whether you agree with them or not, are not allowed to be involved.
Because they've never stood up for indigenous rights. There's a condition precedent here. You cannot participate in political affairs until you have championed indigenous rights. It's more the identity politics. Silence is violence. And then she went on to say, we heard nothing from these groups that supposedly care about island affairs. And then she said, members of Guam Action Pac groups flocked to public hearings to showcase their unwavering support for harmful build-up projects at the expense of our heritage. So are we talking us against them, right? Tausenhidzung? Action Pac na toru tautono is tausenhidzung? Ti natibu? Ti tautotanu? And then she wraps it up this way. Cultural genocide is occurring at a rapid pace, and Guam Action Pac has made it abundantly clear that they are just fine and dandy with the horrific loss of these special parts of our heritage. So that's Maria Hernandez. So then Dave Lontz writes a letter to the editor today, and it's titled, Action Pac Goals Are a Recipe for Disaster. I read Dave's letter, and I see it as pretty much backing up my position. I'm for Action Pac. I think that the positions that they have taken are extremely salutary. This is what they want. They want to decrease the size of local government. They want to improve transparency at all levels of government. They support the military buildup. They support a part-time legislature, and they support rolling back business privilege tax from 5 to 4%. I think these are all good things. And I suppose I'm interfering here, but I would have the temerity to say that I think those things would benefit indigenous people just as much as they benefit Taosenhidung. I was worried there. I thought a stroke of lightning was going to come down through the roof there and strike me right on the spot.
That's why I'm protected against this, behind this wall here.
Yeah. So here's what Dave Lott says. Time to review the action-packed goals. And he starts out, number 1, decrease the size of government. Okay, let's take a short break here, and we'll come back for the 7th inning stretch, and then I'll come back to Dave Lott's.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Howdy, this is Clara Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties, doing real estate since 1978. 14 years here on Guam. Call Maria Miller from Horizon Properties at 777-7792.
Okay, so here I am back with Dave Lotz and his defense of, or actually his attack on Maria Hernandez, as it were. So he starts out, number 1, decrease the size of local government. And then he has a rhetorical question. So what? Individuals and services? So what individuals and services do they want to cut? While in reality, government of Guam agencies are seriously understaffed with policemen, nurses, health inspectors, customs agents, correction officers, and park maintenance officers, etc. And my point is, yes, we don't have enough of those because we got too much of something else. So if we reduce the size of government, took it down to what I want to see, which is an effective, efficient government acting within the rule of law to provide basic government services on at least a break-even basis, then instead of wasting so much money on a too large government, we would be able to fill these positions like policemen, nurses, etc. So point number 1, Dave, goes to me. Okay, I got our Fred on the line. I'm going to stop with Dave here for a minute and go to our Fred. Good afternoon, our Fred.
RAG, good afternoon.
Sir.
Very interesting listening to your show this afternoon. And what came to mind is, don't forget the Dunning-Kruger's list is growing again as of today.
Right.
With your show, you just added a couple more people. So the nominees... going to be tough.
Uh-huh.
So I
Well,
need your help.
I know it's going to be tough,
thinking.
Fred. That's why I gave the job to our Fred. I wouldn't entrust this to just anybody.
We'll pick 3, and then me, Jose, and yourself can vote before the announcement. It's good. It's 3 people, so we won't have a tie.
That's true. Very true,
Yeah,
our Fred.
So that being said, I was thinking the government probably has 4 bullet points on their comebacks for everything that the they and the thems that there exists right now, and ours and theirs, and we are the them. So to address any concerns from them, being you, me, and everybody else on the other side of the government, they have 4 bullet points. I'm thinking that, or 4 reasons, and they pick a reason or pick a comeback to address it with. And I think the first one would be, any comments from the public, they address it and they pick one of these 4. One would be, all right, this falls under the category of self-determination. So the answer to the public's comments has to come from the angle of self-determination. Second, the reason would be indigenous rights. So any response has to come from this angle. Third, has to be from the angle of the Bureau of Women Affairs, the BWA.
Wow.
And discriminating against women.
Also known as the Bureau to Prevent Hurting the Feelings of Women, right?
Right. So that angle, the hurting of women's feelings. Fourth and last, I think, since March, I think this probably is the last one, is considering the health crisis and lives matter. So we're trying to save lives. So I think that would come up with Tom Peinhoff's suit would be, hey, look, we're trying to save lives. Okay?
Yeah, that's all the government has to do is file one piece of paper with one sentence on it. We're trying to save lives. And
in his argument, would be pick the number 4.
Yeah.
So you got self-determination, indigenous rights, not saying things to hurt the feelings of women, and the Bureau of Women Affairs, and fourth, we're trying to save lives.
The 4 commandments.
4 bullet points, 4 commandments for that we're going by, and just pick one and shoot from that angle. Sounds pretty good, huh?
Sounds good to me, our Fred. Yeah.
I think that's where everything's being summed up from these 4 things.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for chipping that in. I got Hanako and Frenchie on the line, so I'm going to...
Great. I want to hear them, too.
Okay, thanks for calling, our Fred. It's always a pleasure. All right. And then I've got, I'm going to hope I'm pronouncing this right, Hanako, right?
Yes. Hi. Hi, Senator.
Hi.
Hi, this is Hanako.
Hanako.
Yes, I've been listening to your show for almost about 1 year now, but until now I haven't called you yet. So I learned so much from you, but I'm frustrated by something. So may I ask you some questions?
You may, Hanako. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Hannah. That would be good.
Okay, Hannah.
Okay. So you keep talking about how this mandatory quarantine is justified by the 1905 Supreme Court case, but you also complain to us. Just Judge Stickman pointed out that such measures cannot be arbitrary or capricious.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. And the measures must be the least restrictive possible.
You got it. That's right,
So,
Hannah.
Yes. And then I believe that our quarantine absolutely defies our Constitution on those 3 grounds. It doesn't match, basically. It is absolutely arbitrary and capricious.
Well,
and it could.
That's what Judge Iriarty found in a few cases that have been brought before her, Hannah.
Yeah. So you have to go all the way to the judge? That's this one need to be solved because arbitrary, it's a capricious case. It's not consistent because this disease is very dangerous. And then why the positive people, tested positive people go home, and then even they're not positive or not negative, and people need to stay in hotel. So it's not capricious.
Well,
it's not arbitrary.
From what we've seen, the way the government is using its power is arbitrary and capricious.
Yes. Yes.
And the law has a built-in remedy, and it says that a person may petition a judge to be released from this improper confinement, and that the government will provide the attorney. So the way the system is supposed to work, if the execution is arbitrary and capricious, and a judge so rules, if that happens a couple of times, the government ought to wise up and say, I think we ought to stop doing this because we're losing a lot of court cases. That's the way it's supposed to work.
So the judge has to judge if it's arbitrary or capricious. That's what you mean.
That's what I mean, yeah. Well, actually, Hannah, the judge or the host of Tall Tales. The host of Tall Tales judgments are swift and extremely accurate, but don't bring about the desired effect. They don't get anybody out of confinement. That's the difference between the host of Tall Tales and the judge.
Well, then, so far, it's a voluntary, and then but basically it's mandatory to go to the hotel.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And then because it's a law, because it's an executive order, because it's an executive order of a governor, the governor can say anything what she wants, or does she have to take a process to make this order?
The law, the statute tells her what her powers are, and it tells her what she must do to execute those powers. And if she doesn't,
there's no time limit.
And if she doesn't follow the statutory guidelines in the execution of her power, then a judge will come along and say, "You did it wrong. I'm going to let these people go."
So this lockdown time, period of lockdown, and mandatory quarantine, those stuff also no time limit. She can decide, okay, I'm going to do for 1 year, so she can just do.
Well, she can do it in 30-day periods, and at the end of a 30-day period, her powers expire unless she renews for 30 more days. But as I explained concerning Tello Taitigui, the legislature can end that with a majority vote. If they so fit, they could end that magic powers.
So you mean she can extend for 30 days and another 30 days?
And another 30 days and on and on and on, yeah.
On and on.
Mm-hmm.
Really? So there's no you mean the Senate or any Congress meeting doesn't need to require. She doesn't have to require. I'm just wondering.
8 members of the legislature could put a stop to it. They could end it at the end of the current 30-day period, but they actually have to do something, and that's what I was talking with Tello about on Ray's show this morning, and what I picked up this afternoon. Doing nothing allows the governor to exercise these magic powers as long as she wants, and to do them in an arbitrary and capricious fashion until the judge comes along and lets people go one by one.
Okay, so people just need to do if I come back from Japan, then I have to request to judge. I want to go home.
You'd have to request to a judge, yeah.
That's the process everybody needs to take.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, I'm glad you called, Anna, and welcome to the Tailgaters Club.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye. You have a good night.
So long. Okay, and then I've got, waiting in the green room, I've got Frenchie. So I wonder, should I take a break before we go to Frenchie? Yeah. Frenchie, I'm going to take a break, and then we'll start down the home stretch with you.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumon or call 646-1463.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
Here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch of another exciting educational episode of Tall Tales. And who do I have to help me ride down the home stretch? None other than, let's give him a big round of applause, Frenchie. Welcome aboard, Frenchie.
I'm not worthy. Anyhow, good afternoon, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, I happened to catch your conversation with Tello this morning. It was kind of funny. It was like a mouse trying to run away from the cat. She kept on trying to avoid making a decision and pushing it back on the lawyers, which was quite bad. But so we'll see. I'm not very... and she's supposed to be the backbone of the Republicans in the Senate.
She's the minority leader, yeah.
Yeah, it's not very encouraging. But anyhow, you put your point forward, and they were all very good. So, what's very interesting is this whole thing is, and I think we need, I think Ray pointed early this morning, the original argument for this whole charade that we're going through right now was that we were facing an end-of-the-world situation, and we had predictions of 20,000 plus deaths and an overwhelming of our already very derelict health system. And this is why I think most people were willing and able to put up with the first confinement. And that is beside the quarantine for travelers, but the confinement that we are again experiencing right now. And it was a typical approach of create fear in order to control people, and the Senate went along with it, and as soon as they agreed to give special powers to the governor, she put away every kind of review of what she's doing. Basically, she's doing it. Most of the things she does are in secret, and we just found out once she's taken a decision. It's interesting also how the Senate has totally abdicated its responsibility and keeps on kicking the ball down the road, which is exactly what Taylor was doing this morning in trying to argue, well, let's talk about it with some lawyers. We are way past that. And basically what we as voters want to know is the minority leader going to find a backbone and bring it forward before the election that, hey, this is not right. We don't think it's appropriate in the state that we're in now, and this is not the right approach. But I think she's chosen a wait and see, and let's wait for the election is over, and hopefully we'll have 8 people, rather than trying to convince the few Democrats that would probably join her if she was showing leadership, but she's not.
On the point of the lawyers, Frenchie, I mentioned the term, people will lawyer up when they think they're in trouble. Classic.
You did.
Classic Law and Order scene. Briscoe says, "Now tell us, where were you at 8:00 last night?" And the answer is, "I want a lawyer."
That's right. Yeah, that was exactly what she did this morning. It was kind of disappointing. I was glad that she called the show and agreed to discuss with Ray and you, but the performance was lackluster. Let's put it this way. I think that there is a lot of interesting things that we need to focus on, and only a few people have really narrowed their view on that to what it is that we're in. Right now, the only communication we get from the government or the health department, which is interesting because they chose to have Janela as their spokesperson. So talking about a symbol of shutting communications down, is what is going on outside of the island, and how is the crisis evolving around the world. And one thing that was very interesting this weekend was Germany. Now, as you've seen, Germany has had very large demonstration against wearing the mask in outside, against massive testing and so on. And Germany, until now, had been the second country beyond the United States as far as testing in order to find out where the clusters were. The United States, I think, so far has tested almost 70 million people, which is a huge effort, despite what the Democrats are saying. And the German parliament had a commission, a medical commission, that they tasked a few weeks back to analyze what was done right and what was done wrong in Germany. And Germany has been quite successful as kind of getting some good results. But their commission came back, I think Saturday, with their conclusions. And their conclusion was that testing, which they use the same tests that we do here in the U.S. and here on Guam, is ineffective overall. That there was way too many false positives, and the test was way too sensitive to make the difference between a person that is positive and contagious and a person that had been exposed a long time ago. Therefore, they were recommending that they stop testing. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, in the U.S., most governors, like on Guam, have been using testing as an excuse to keep people locked down or to keep people wearing masks, which is also quite controversial, but I won't go into it this time. So what they were concluding, and it was a huge bomb effect all over Europe, because Germany, of course, is the most and largest state within the European Union, was that what they were saying is what is really important is the rate of hospitalization. Now, granted, on Guam, we've seen an increase of the rate of hospitalization within the last months, right? And ultimately, what's important is the actual number of deaths, and I think we're up to 30-something. Have you kind of followed a little bit?
I think it's 33, but I think
it's hard to follow because communication on this is terrible. They just release numbers of positive to the newspaper, and every day we see so many more new positives, and it's like it's fueling that feeling that we are in a real crisis, while in fact we're not, right? And then, of course, the last question was, how do you decide who died of the virus rather than some other second issue that they might have?
Well, I mean, you start out by keeping Andrew Camacho out of the room, right, Frenchie?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So, but we've had silly things like accident victim were tested post-mortem, and then they put them in the positive for virus infection. Heart attack victim, people in their 90s. We had a couple, I think, last week. A couple of people that were in their 90s, and they had a lot of other health issues. They put them in the column. So suddenly we have an increase of deaths related to the virus, while in fact we don't even have a legis doctor who can confirm that those people died of the virus and not some other thing. So it's up to the people, the same people that refuse to give us the information about a lot of things, to decide who died of what, when, and how. And this doesn't give me any consolation about what kind of crisis we're in. And really, if the senators wanted to know, they could demand to know exactly those numbers, and they are not even doing it. That would be a first good step before getting 8 people to go, and because then we will have a right picture of what's really going on. And so far, we are not able to do so. And the doctors, I'm sorry, but Dr. Nguyen and Akimoto, who had found some kind of courage, right now are just folded and just going on with the flow because they probably don't want to lose the license for their establishment.
Or maybe they woke up in the morning and found a horse's head at the foot of their bed, Frenchie.
Yeah. I know you mentioned that before. So, here we are. We're facing those things. We don't have any real communication. We have a legislator that has abdicated their powers, and they refuse to even ask the right numbers and to call the head of the health department in front of the legislator and ask those hard questions and get an answer. And if they don't get an answer, get 8 senators to get us out of this false emergency. Now, granted, some people died, but it's absolutely nothing compared to a bad flu season. And so far, they have not given us anything. And the last parenthesis is beside the point. You're talking about Dave Lotzer. I mean, this guy is a cook, I mean, he's for independence of Guam. He's one of those shameful white people that want to be more royalists than the king. And so in his case, he wants to be more independentist than the independentist.
I don't know if he's a separatist, but I would suspect he's at least a fellow traveler, as we used to understand that term, Frenchie, remember?
Yeah, correct, yeah. I have not used that in a while, but I'm sure you're right on that. The only thing he does well is that he's heading that group of people going trekking around the island and
Boonie Stompers.
Yeah,
exactly, Jose. Yeah, the Boonie Stompers.
And he worked miracles. He was able to find these trails and take people out on hike after hike after hike. He brought everybody back safely. And Kelly Titano signs had not been put in place to warn him of all of the perils of the places that he went. So he was just a miracle worker.
That's correct. He only lost one person over the years. Was that 50-something person that tried to act like a 20 years old and fell with his head on the rock or something. But otherwise, I mean, he's doing a good job on that. But for the rest, he's a real cook. Very dangerous individual. He falls along the line of the physicians for BLM, you know.
BLM for white coats for Black Lives.
For BLM, yeah.
Tom Shea. I'm wondering if Tom is going to see if he can work that a little bit harder so he can get some people out here to riot and commit arson and looting. You know, if he to really show that we're with it.
Yeah, I kind of chatted with him online for a while. I think he realized the foolishness of his approach, but I think he was taken in that flow in Hawaii of that thing going on. And but as actually in this crisis, as a medical, he's about one of the only one that makes sense. And of course, he's the only one the governor doesn't listen to. Yeah.
Well, you know, his specialty is really at cross purposes with the governor's philosophical orientation,
yes,
because Tom makes a living giving birth to babies.
Yeah. And she made a career killing babies.
Killing babies before they get a chance to be born. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, anyhow, so that was my 2 grains of salt on this.
Good timing, Frenchie, because the plaintive strains of Rebel's Bolero are now becoming apparent. So good talking to you.
I'm going to have to give you that huge poster hanging in my living room of Ravel.
All right. Thank you, Frenchie. Okay, another episode of Tall Tales tomorrow, 1600. We'll see you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
We'll find out who on Saturday. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Trump revealing that's when he'll announce the nominee to fill the Supreme Court vacancy.
I'm getting very close to having a final decision made. Very, very close.
Another key senator